Hey gang, welcome back. It is I, Dr. Bosky, and today, after we did our engineering meeting, let me get this coffee real quick. Rob, thank you very much, Rob, is ready to basically have an updated test scene, which has a few more elements. So our strategy up to this point has been, let's just minimize the complexity of the project because the Interstellar Sentinel project has a lot. And instead of trying to do everything all at once, we've created a sort of a proxy prototype project so we can look at things a little bit more piecemeal. Rob, I think after this, it's probably going to be good for us. Like I might be able to set up a couple other things that are very specific, but copying things, re-implementing things that are in one project over to the prototype is quite slow on my side. So it's probably going to be better for us to then spin up more test levels inside of the Interstellar project. So, and I figure we can do that next time or really soon. So, but per our conversation, I wanted to show you what we have. I have, let's see here. Cool. So I got my notes here. So we got the new prototype level. I've updated control. Yes, I'll just, instead of going through these, I will show you. All right, cool. So first off, let's just do the fun stuff. So here is the new level. I did update player speeds to match what's actually in Interstellar 1, so that thing's a little bit faster. I added the different backgrounds here for scrolling. There are the weapons. So the equivalent of the X button on the controller and the B button since you're using an Xbox controller. So X is the rapid fire top shot. And then the B button is basically this plasma laser thing. So, which will probably break your brain a little bit with the plasma laser implementation. So, we do have plasma lasers in the game. This is a temporary scene bit here. So, yeah. So that's so there. The inputs are there, which I can show you real quick on the control side. So these are all mapped. I double checked that dead zone and sensitivity values are what they are in the regular Interstellar project as well. I also added per our conversation the effects gameplay object, which is so you have in the gameplay bits, you have an effects piece here. In this particular case, it's the DBK wings. I added the particle, which if you come into the editor, there is a particle system editor. And in the particle system editor, there is a DBK wings here. And I've set the max particles for this to be 1. It's going to be constant and infinite. The emission rate is 1. And it'll only, I think, what is this emission rate is... I think it'll only emit 1 at a time. And then once that's done, it'll emit a second one, which is not a big deal for us. So on the second tab here, there is this duration basically creates the speed of which the sprite is animating. It's basically just a texture sheet. So columns are 4, rows are 2 for those. And then the important thing here is the life min max is 999 seconds, way longer than in general. Yes, there are other things, but in general, than any like level playthrough will be. Level playthroughs are like 7 minutes, so we're pretty good in this way. So again, it's kind of a hack just to keep that there. And then on the property side, so there's no color over life. It's all the same in this particular case, and it's set to be a 2D effect, which forces the particle to stay in a plane for flat effects. So there isn't any depth to that. Hook that thing up. So as a particle system editor, the other as the particle system, this is the DPA wings. Scale is just set to 1. This doesn't really matter because we're never off screen, but there's no off camera pause timeout. And then the other thing that's probably worth noting here is you can see here, there's like this little hook and anchor right here. And that's basically done with the attachment system. And so the attachment system is basically allows you to attach, in this particular case, this thing to the player. So the other thing that comes complexity-wise is we have this thing in the engine called the layers editor. So, and the short version is that the top of the stack is always, what is this? So is it, yeah, so it's always closest to the camera, and then the farther down you go in the stack, it's always further away. So, and it's important here. So you'll notice that So here, the wings actually cover part of the body of Dr. Bosky. And by design, and the reason why that works that way is because this particle is actually set to be closer to the camera in front in terms of sorting in front of Dr. Bosky. So I thought I would kind of point that out because that's going to give you something else that we need to implement and be aware of. So we can add, I don't know, I think we adding up to 32 layers. And inside of Interstellar Sentinel 1, just to give you a sense. So let me, we're going to sprawl a little bit here. So, Katoosh. I'll show you where some of the layers that we've set up. So you kind of have an idea of kind of the way I've structured them. For the most part, most levels have the same layers. I've been pretty good about that. There are some exceptions, but here you go. So here's level 1. In the particular case of sorting particles, right? When we get back to it, basically there's another effects particle in there. This is the weak spot, like cross glowy bit, right? So, which you can see here. So that's this thing here. Always making sure that this is on top of everything else, because you never want, or at least from my perspective, we never want to have the player not be able to see their vulnerability spot. So, and then we have a UI layer, which, you know, is, so this is a bit of a misnomer. So this isn't, these are the UI bits. This is handled by the engine in terms of layering, but I have some other things that I've added to, like, for instance, we have this little bit here, which is a little animated sprite sheet. So I think it's just a fake enemy. We have this one up here as well. And there's some other bits, like there's the glowy bit inside the gauge here. So those things are handled by the UI layer, again, wanting those to be high up. Then we have the rank system has its own layering, so I can obviously turn on and off this stuff. Loki's had their own layer. There's the default layer, which is probably the primary stuff. And then depending on the level, we are using layers differently. So here, for instance, we have at the end of this level, we have this forest layer, right? Which is something like this. I think this will still be fine. Can I do that? Yeah, okay, cool. And you can see like this in this particular case, I took the opportunity to create a fake parallax layer that is sort of in front of everything else in order to sort of give that simulation that we're kind of flying into the island side of things. And so that's handled by its own layers. So in order to sort things out, sometimes it's just for organizational purposes. Sometimes it's because I'm trying to enforce the ordering of the layers. So that's the brief overview of that. All right, let me get back to it. Let's go back to the other project. Oh, prototype. Do not save. All right. So also I created a secondary level. So it's the enemies in terms of levels. You want to load that one in particular. And yeah, so we talked about, we have the new backgrounds. These have basically the same parallaxing values. Oh, something else that I needed to change that I realized wasn't quite working is boop, 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 boop. And okay, so let me take a look. Game settings. So in the engine, we have this thing called Pixel Sprites Scale. And this basically says zoom all the sprites with a special shader, which keeps the pixels sharp. Now, we don't really have pixel art. And unfortunately, when I started the project and discovered where we're at with this, it was already too late to go back. Relatively speaking, too late to go back and change a huge chunk of the project. So, but to give you an example of what's going on with this. So sprites, right, as we expect. And if I change this to 1, I think it can only go to 1. Yeah, okay. So you can tell everything is much smaller. So it's, you know, it is as advertised. It's a, you know, a spritey bit. So we probably, since we're going to get away with it anyways, I don't think we need it. You know, like, we don't really need the pixel sprite scale scaler. Can I make that? It's a 4 is as big as it can be. It's very nice scaler. You know, for the most part, like, you can start to see the art starting to fall apart here. And apparently it doesn't like that they're at their bits. So anyways, I digress. So I think for our purposes, right, I just wanted you to be aware that this effect exists in the engine. I don't think we need to carry that over. We're not using it for anything, but it does affect the size in which things are in the world, and that's something we'll need to account for. So like when we come back to, because everything in the game, of course, is it needs to be the exact same size. So then we have the same gameplay, right? Because anyways, you know why. All right, cool. So there's that side bit there, and we're also prototype level updated controls. We talked about. So using the PlayStation controller where it talked about, I did the. I haven't checked in your executable yet. Okay, so the other piece here is that we have enemies. Huzzah! Yay, enemies! So something that is worth knowing here is in the animation tab. There's a curves editor, which is enemy can move on the X and Z with sinus curves, right? And so Y is depth in this particular engine. So I'm only using the X and the Z, but you can see here that is giving them kind of like this little like warbly around kind of bits. So I want you to be aware that we do use this in some cases in the game. It's not on everything. And if there's no amplitude, then it doesn't really matter what the frequency is. So in this particular case, but I want you to be aware that this exists as part of us doing setup for characters in enemies in the engine. So, and the other side of that is I didn't go deeply in terms of death sprites or any of that other stuff. We will obviously get there, but I think that moving to the actual project is going to be better because re-implementing all of this is definitely not worth it just to have a more stripped down test bed. So, all right. What else is there? Let's see. So in the editor, I basically just created a string of enemies so you could have them. The thing is I created two enemy types here. So they're both the robonoids. So here you'll notice that so the cool part here is that so robonoids basically they have a waypoint system, basically just a spline, right? So you can grab the spline bits and move them around. And so some of the functionality that I have in waypoints is I have the ability for enemies to follow the path direction. So they basically rotate to follow the path, which you can see here. So those guys are dipping. And if you look at these guys in comparison, they are not dipping. So I want you to be aware that both of the enemies have slightly different behaviors. But so just so you're not going crazy with that. And all I have to do is I can control this on a per waypoint. So there's 8 waypoints that I put in here. Fixed orientation is what I'm using for one. And then path direction is what I'm using for the other. And I think the other bits here is that we have some path options. So the main point is that as you dig in here, you'll see that there are a lot of parameters that are dumped based on this. And so I have set those up accordingly. The other thing here is you will notice. So, the other thing. Okay, yeah. So let me double check. So then, for instance, in all 3 of these spawns, so this is a single enemy, but we're also utilizing what's called the wave feature, and the wave feature is essentially number of spawns in this case are 5, but I could make that 50, for instance. And it is as advertised. So we use that quite a bit in Interstellar 1 for the strings of enemies. So timings, so you can see their spawn interval, invincibility duration, and then there is a particle system that is added when each of the enemies spawn. There's some other stuff we'll talk about in that space, but I want you to be aware that these parameters exist. And then also, so with this guy here, you can see the little spline helper guide. This guy is using the wave system as well. In this case, there are shapes. So this is a circle shape. I can change the width and height of the shape, blah, 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 end angles, all that good stuff. Orientation. and how these guys spawn in. So I just wanted you to be aware that there's slightly different use cases for these, and that yeah. So we won't want to support that because it's also used in Interstellar 1. And there are other things, but I think this is the gist of it, right? Like the main thing we want to do is actually, here we go. This is important. So in the editor, so every enemy, so like this is a good example. I didn't actually, I have the ability to set the collision shape, and it's basically just grabbing the collision knobbers, and essentially I can adjust the collision volume for their enemy, right? So I wind up kind of doing this quite a bit here, where I kind of like when the sprites overlap, it makes it feel like they're kind of digging into the enemy when we shoot them. So, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. So actually, maybe come back here. All right, cool. And so it's not the size of the sprite. So that's something else that I'm not sure when we take a look, but you'll want to dig into how the collision is exported with each of the sprites. This is how I wind up authoring it. Yeah, so I want you to be aware of that as well. So otherwise, what will happen is we have all these chunky hitboxes, especially with chunky hitboxes, and then it feels terrible because you're shooting hitboxes as opposed to characters perception wise. Okay, was there anything else? So there's enemy types. So we talked about the parallaxing. So with the parallaxing layers, I went into, let's see here, level properties. And under level properties, I basically added these assets to the pictures directory. That's where they're at. So you can see how they're all named. We added these little tails for the layering, but this will give you a sense for like, now we can verify that the sorting for the layers is correct. And then you can see each of the 5 different layers and how they parallax. So, and this is matched to what's in Interstellar 1 as well. So, so that'll be good for making sure we set up the sorting correctly. Okay, so that was that. All right. We talked about camera sprite scaling, and we talked about DBK particles. Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is essentially, I will get this video up as well. I added a Trello card for us, in which I linked the prototype project. I think it's here, so it's around here somewhere. But anyways, so I will get this video up, so because I think this will be helpful. And then, yeah, I'm excited because this week, I need to still check your stuff. But this week, I think we're porting just a little bit more functionality. We're starting to kind of be able to get to how the stuff is authored and how we're translating that into our new engine. So thank you very much. See you next time.